My name is Freddie Ndimuli. How hot is the coffee where you are?
You're actually standing here in Gator Fred. How many days?
To what?
To tomorrow.
I knew you'd slide it somewhere there. Anyway, let's take a look at the headlines this morning. And we start off with the Standard. Legends last promise. Yes, we continue to mourn Kelvin Kiptum. That's a Standard. On the Daily Nation, tribute to Kenya's rising star. That's a big headline on the Daily Nation. Nyota ya Kenya yazima, same headline on Taifa Leo. Star decided to go a totally different way. Kenha errors, Kenyans slapped with 3 billion shillings bill. And on the People Daily, we do have congestion headache in top schools. Those are the headlines this morning. We'll be looking at them and more later on. Let's take a look at the traffic and the weather with Stan.
All right, let's start with the traffic. And in case you're just joining us right now, and in case you're in the house, planning to leave the house, let's see the kind of roads that you should be avoiding. So this is into the CBD, but this is Mombasa Road. Let's just zoom in into a couple of roads that you should be avoiding just before you hit the Mlolongo main footbridge. There is a slight traffic snarl-up there. You should probably be avoiding that. And let's get into Nairobi. Just before you actually hit that particular next-gen mall roundabout, the yellow strip, that slight traffic snarl-up as well. I was taking a look at Thika Road earlier. It was smooth. And also just before you actually hit the Kiambu Road as well, smooth. A few patches of yellow, meaning a few patches of traffic snarl-ups, but we'll be easing after on that. Yesterday I was taking a look at the weather for Kiambu. Today I'm taking a look at Murang'a County and Murang'a and its environs and how it might be. 17 degrees Celsius. So Kiamka Sahi, don't be afraid. It's not that cold right now. But it promises to get as high as 29 degrees Celsius in that county, in Murang'a County and its environs. That is the weather and the traffic to the highlights.
All right. Our highlights this morning. National Assembly and Senate set to resume their sittings this afternoon following more than 2 months of recess amidst a highly charged political environment over government flagship projects. Messages of condolences from world leaders, sports enthusiasts and fans alike continue to pour in following the tragic death of men's world marathon record holder Kelvin Kiptum in a road accident on Sunday. And beyond our borders, celebrations as thousands of football fans wearing orange and white flood the streets of Abidjan to see the Ivory Coast team parade the Africa Cup of Nations trophy that they won on Sunday. Those are the highlights. Let's now take a look at the day's diary.
All right, even as we take a look at the day's diary, Fred, I'm pretty sure you're very eager to be at Ivory Coast during that rally.
Oh, what I would have paid just to be there, especially for that winners parade. That was something.
Let's take a look at what to expect in our subsequent bulletins today. And first off, obviously, on our highlight, the 13th Parliament is expected to have a full-in tray as of today as it resumes sittings following a long recess since last year. The members of the August House are set to debate, reject or approve various pieces of legislation before it and whose outcomes will have far-reaching ramifications for Kenyans and President William Ruto's administration. Meanwhile, today, Kenya will be joining other countries to commemorate International Condom Day. The day was established by the AIDS Healthcare Foundation, AHF, in 2009 to emphasize the message of responsible and safe sexual behavior. Meanwhile, today is World Radio Day. It is an international day celebrated on Saturday, the 13th of February. The day is set aside by UNESCO to celebrate radio broadcast, improve international cooperation among radio broadcasters, and encourage decision makers to create and provide access to information through radio, including community radios. And we'll be giving you more updates on that as well. We definitely do have Radio 47. Matters party politics. Wiper Party leader Kalonzo Musyoka will wrap up his Mount Kenya region tour today. He's expected to tour Embu Town and open the party's office at Karaba Market. So Kalonzo has been in Embu and Meru since Sunday to lead the party's recruitment drive and popularize the party. Meanwhile, the Departmental Committee on Administration and Internal Security will today be meeting with officials of the Protective Security Industry Association on the petition regarding intended enforcement of payment of minimum wage to security guards. So the association has sued the Private Security Regulatory Authority, Attorney General Justin Muturi, and CSs of Interior and Ministry of Labour and Social Protection. In courts today, former Busia Governor Sospita Ojamong will be appearing before the Milimani Anti-Corruption Court for the next 2 days for the hearing of a case where he is charged with conspiracy to commit an economic crime. Meanwhile, former Mandera South MP Adan Haji is required to appear before the Mombasa Anti-Corruption Court, where he is charged with conflict of interest to Section 42. And according to the ESCC, Haji has been on the run evading arrest. Let's take a look at today in history, and we do start with 2022 in Tunisia, where thousands of Tunisians protested in the central Tunis after President Kais Saied officially replaced a judicial watchdog and gave himself powers to sack judges and ban them from going on strike. And 2011, Nigeria mourns the death of at least 11 people who lost their lives following a stampede during the campaign rally for the Nigerian President Goodluck Jonathan on that previous day. That is our cue to ingia kwenye magazetini. Right. I think we're waiting.
All right,
for that,
straight to the papers, and we start off with the Standard this morning. Legends' last promise. That's a big headline on the front page of the Standard against a black background. And the image of Kelvin Kiptum, the men's world marathon record holder who passed on at the tender age of 24 on Sunday in that tragic road accident along the Eldoret Eldamaravind Road. And they say, "Go too soon." Marathon record holder spoke to the two people dear to his heart, his father and his wife. He made them a promise that may just be that. To his wife, he vowed to be the first human to run a marathon under 2 hours. To his father, he had bought land and pledged to build a church. Sunday night, the legendary athlete bowed out after being involved in a tragic accident. And the story has been covered on pages 2 and 3, plus the sports pages 38. And on the front page, they have different people who have sent their messages of condolence. His father, Samson Cheruiyot, his wife, SIGNET Kiptum, marathon champion Eliud Kipchoge, President William Ruto, and Seb Coe, World Athletics President. And that is a main, this story occupies most of the space on the front page, leaving space only for 3 other highlights on the top strip of the Standard. Let's take a look at those. 1, Raila to Ruto, do not touch our security organs. This is about the composition of the National Security Council. And Azimio claims that Kenya Kwanza is trying to sneak in one more person into that. Elsewhere, 4 people in Devani Triton case set free. And in sports, Ivory Coast proved doubters wrong in AFCON. And I told you this. Let's just flip over. And yes, very colorful back page of the Standard. A lot of yellow and white and celebrations, beautiful smiles, beautiful women. Wow. Ivory Coast relief after winning Cup of Nations. And you saw that winners parade yesterday on the streets of Abidjan. It was part of our highlights this morning. And yes, they deserve these celebrations. And so to Ivory Coast, the Elephants, one more time, congratulations.
Makofi yangu iliisha jana. I clapped for you guys.
You know, you'll even on the Daily Nation, I'm sure you'll still find Ivory Coast somewhere there.
Oh, yes.
Okay, that's the standard.
On the top scroll on the back page. But on the front page, they only have two stories there. The main one having more than three-quarters of the front page, tribute to Kenya's rising star. At only 24 years, Kelvin Kiptum was the men's marathon world record holder. Crowned last year on his third major race, he was destined for greatness. But his dream to run the 42 kilometers in under 2 hours, a first in open competition, was shattered yesterday when he was killed in a road crash. They have that extensive from pages 2, 3, 37, 38, as well as 39. On the bottom, e-Citizen nightmare. It was meant to ease access to public services by enabling Kenyans to apply and pay for them at their convenience, using the mobile phones or computers. A noble idea on paper, they say. But the e-Citizen plan is now characterized more by patients waiting hours on end to see doctors, car dealers unable to register and transfer ownership of vehicles, and banks battling similar NTSA registration hurdles. The red tape just got worse. They have that on pages 6 and 7. But key to also look at other highlights focused in insert this paper. On page 5, they say President returns to restive Mount Kenya. So he's expected to visit Murang'a, Nyeri, and Kiambu counties as of tomorrow, Valentine's, and on Thursday, for what they call amid economic and political rumblings in the region. That, in a nutshell, is the Daily Nation. Tuendelee?
All right. Let's take a look at the People Daily. And on the front page of the People Daily, it also makes reference and a tribute to world marathon record holder Kiptum, with a photo of him holding his trophy during the World Athletics Awards ceremony on December 12th last year in Monaco. That image is actually at the center of the front page of the Business Daily today. Other highlights away from morning Kiptum on the Business Daily. The headline, new Eurobond seeing easing pressure on domestic debt interest rates. Treasury now selling first Eurobonds since June 2021, and banks warn high interest rates could trigger defaults. Now, Kenya's return to the international bonds market yesterday is set to relieve pressure on local lenders to finance the budget deficit for the current fiscal year, signaling a potential retreat in domestic debt interest rates that have climbed to 18%. So there could be some relief coming the way of borrowers, especially from local banks. The other highlight on the front page of the Business Daily, prime office rent flat as oversupply hurts recovery boon. Prime office developers kept their asking rents flat, even as occupancy rates increased, making investors in commercial space miss out on the double-digit returns being witnessed by their peers in other segments of real estate. Still on the front page of the Business Daily, let's take a look at the ticker for more highlights. CBK projects 734 billion shilling inflows on foreign investors. Elsewhere, UK firm to invest 4.6 billion in Malindi solar battery storage. And why NSE-listed firms are snapping bonus shares. Firms listed on the Nairobi Securities Exchange last year avoided bonus share schemes to shareholders as the value of investor wealth on the bourse dropped by 27.54%. And yes, on the back page, how to tie ESG goals to executive compensation. That's a Business Daily.
Right, from BD to PD, which Director alikuwa umetokea hapo. The Good Matters Education is a big and screaming headline, congestion headache in top schools, and they call it a crisis. Institutions forced to use offices, laboratories, and tents as classrooms after high number of students reported to Form 1 in a campaign to meet 100% transition target by the ministry. On page 4. On the right, another story that also focused on our highlights this morning, the return of members of Parliament as well as the Senate today, as over around 2:30 p.m. there. MPs signal new battle on housing levy. And that story that every single paper is talking about here in Kenya. World Mount Marathon champion Kiptum, runner and his coach killed in night accident on their way to training camp. The wreckage there, they're focusing on that story on page 6, as well as 30 and 31. Meanwhile, totally the countdown continues, Fred. They say it is early Valentine's for Thika magistrate. I'm curious. And they also have the photo of, I believe, the magistrate, Stella Tambo. So it is definitely, for context, to dive into what is actually happening. So early Valentine's is Thika residents' fit magistrate. They say Abita, known for her rulings and celebrated for fair dispensation of legal garlanded. And they have some of the, well, basically the magistrate receiving a bouquet of flowers there.
All right.
The countdown
Congratulations
continues.
for her.
Yes.
Okay.
Back to the front page of this paper, and still on the top scroll, community builds bans to restore Amboseli ecosystem. That is on page 23. That is PD for you.
All right. Let's take a look at Taifa Leo. Na kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Taifa Leo hii leo, habari kuu pale sawia na kwingineko kwa magazeti mengine, nyota ya Kenya yazima, masuala ya msiba. Ndoto ya Kenya kuchipuza mkimbiaji wa kwanza duniani kutimka marathon kwa muda wa chini ya saa 2 ilikuwa kwa Kelvin Kiptum. Na habari yenyewe iko kwenye ukurasa wa 2 na ukurasa wa 18 katika gazeti hili la Taifa Leo. Mauti yapokonya Kenya mwanariadha taa alitarajiwa kuandikisha rekodi ya kipekee ya dunia hivi karibuni. Kelvin Kiptum alizaliwa mwaka wa 1999. Vidokezo zaidi kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Taifa Leo. Mikutano ya Kalonzo yazuiwa, polisi wakataa kuidhinisha mikutano ya eneo la Tharaka. Kwingineko masuala ya usalama, Raila aonya serikali. Kinara wa Azimio adai ipo njama ya kuteka baraza la usalama. Kwenye masuala ya spoti, UEFA, Man City, Real mawindoni. Twende pale juu kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Taifa Leo, vidokezo zaidi pale. Jinsi Rigathi alivyomfiata Nyoro mdomo. Naibu Rais avizia ngome ya Ndindi Murang'a bila kelele na mkakati madhubuti. Kwingineko masuala ya spoti. Ndovu Ivory Coast watwaa AFCON ya 3. Baada ya kufuzu kimungumungu wapepeta Super Eagles katika finali.
Neno kuu pale.
Najua hapo utashikilia sasa.
Neno kuu pale ni kimungumungu tu.
Neno kuu kwangu ni kwamba wametwaa AFCON ya 3.
As Englishmen say, in mysterious ways. Very mysterious.
Chupu chupu. Na hilo ndilo gazeti la Taifa Leo hii leo.
Let's take a look at the Star. And the big story, they actually didn't really focus on the main highlight that other papers are focusing on. That is Kiptum's death. They tell you Kenya errors. Kenyans slapped with a 3 billion Kenyan shillings bill, and dozens of Jubilee-era projects have stalled, exposing taxpayers to more charges. We have the lowdown on pages 4 and 5. So there's a whole audit, and road agencies charged 3.4 billion Kenyan shillings in interest for delayed payments. On the bottom there, they take you all the way to Muthuro Market, where traders carry on with their activities near a heap of uncollected garbage. Traders navigating a muddy road at Kangemi Harambe Market and a section of the dilapidated Kangemi Harambe Market. And they tell you gross, so better wash the food you eat thoroughly. And I don't know how much we really think about how the food that we have after we've bought it, the hands that it has exchanged and all that. On the right, big interview. It is a privilege to fly the pride of Africa. There's according to the KQ boss. From that, giant 30 billion Kenyan shillings hospital on the verge of collapse. That is Medihill Group of Hospitals. And plea again, a sick woman who killed a child saved from going to jail. So context on this is a plea bargain spared a woman from jail, although she had beaten her 2-year-old nephew to death because she thought he was possessed by a demon. Instead, she got 3 years probation on the 5th of February. And they also remind you to pick the My Government pullout paper.
Okay.
Believe that is
Today being Tuesday. Okay, let's cross over to our neighbors, and we start off with Uganda. Under the paper there, the Daily Monitor. On the front page of the Daily Monitor this morning, hackers target banks, telecoms, a cyber attack. Government kicks off investigations into reports that a group of hackers called Anonymous Sudan was behind the plot. I've heard of this Anonymous Sudan before.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. They're using mobile phone networks to hack into banks and websites. And I think they've targeted Kenya before. Even when the e-citizen was down sometime, I think last year or the year before.
Yeah, last year.
I think they were accused of being behind some of those attacks. Elsewhere, also on the front page of the Daily Monitor, they make mention of the men's world marathon record holder, Kelvin Kiptum's death. And they say that the world mourns marathon world record holder Kiptum on the front page of the Daily Monitor. Elsewhere, man knocks son dead in a freak accident. And yes, those are the main headlines in Kampala, Uganda, at least as far as the Daily Monitor is concerned. Let's take a look at the other daily, and that's the New Vision. The New Vision goes with something different. 9 tea factories shut down. High production costs put 100,000 jobs at risk. That's a special report about the tea industry in Uganda. Away from matters tea, U.S. envoy advises Uganda on readmission to AGOA. They were suspended just the other day following their stance on LGBTQ rights in Uganda. Those are the main headlines according to the dailies in Kampala, Uganda this morning. Right.
From Uganda to Tanzania, before we finish up with Rwanda, gazeti la Mwananchi, JK ataja jipya urafiki na Edo, aeleza walivyofahamiana tangu ujana, na kisa cha wote wawili kuchukulia fomu za urais 1995. Masuala mengine pale, bunge lataka wanafunzi wote wawe na bima afya. Vidokezo, baadhi ya vidokezo kwenye gazeti hili. Kidokezo moja au habari moja kwenye magazeti mengi kule Tanzania, dakika 25 za Samia, Papa Francis, Vatican. And that story is also focused on the Citizen, where they say, the front page of the Citizen, what Samia discussed with Pope Francis. And there's a quote there, a statement issued by the Holy Press. They recalled the important role that the Catholic Church plays in Tanzania in favor of the population, especially in the charitable, educational, healthcare spheres, and the challenges the country is required to face. That is the Citizen this morning. On the big story now, matters business. Tanzania's payment trends inspire cashless economy, with over 150 trillion shillings recorded in annual transactions. Tanzania's payment systems have shown a broader trend towards digitization and a shift away from cash-based economy. The quoted number here, 114 trillion Tanzanian shillings though. And this is between 2018 and 2022. Data analyzed by the Citizen shows that the mobile money transactions had the highest value at 114.34 Tanzanian shillings, Tanzanian shillings, up from 81.37 trillion Tanzanian shillings. And that is the Citizen for you. Let's take a look at Rwanda. The paper is the New Times. They say kidney transplants now covered under Mutuelle de Santé. Santé, but this matters health. En français.
Okay.
Oui.
Oui, oui.
Oui, oui. And they say kidney transplant services started being offered at King Faisal Hospital in May 2023. And that is just but a number of what to expect. Also in Rwanda, Rwanda will be hosting Rwanda to host Center of Excellence for UN Peacekeeping. There's an opinion there, regeneration of wetlands. It's the spirit of Rwanda, isn't it? That is our cue to get into the caricatures this morning. We're getting into this paper for People Daily on page 10.
And I'm looking for the cartoon on the Daily Nation. It's actually been hidden by some huge Valentine splash. I don't know if they have a cartoon today.
Well, even as you continue looking for it, this is a cartoon that you'll enjoy for the rest of today.
All right, yeah, I'm liking it already.
Yes, there you have it.
The
Big
elephants
yes.
standing on the eagle.
On the eagle, yes.
So I guess the Daily Nation has decided to go with Valentine, so they do not have a cartoon today. Quite sad. Anyway, on the Standard, let's take a look at the cartoon. Yes, also a tribute to Kelvin Kiptum. And they have a photo there, not a photo, a caricature of the fallen athlete with the words RIP in the colors of the Kenyan flag. Yes, rest in peace, Kelvin Kiptum. And those are the cartoons this morning.
There you have it on the screen, yes.
Yes, I think a befitting tribute to this great athlete who passed on at a very tender age of only 24.
Oh, yes.
Now, after the break, we'll be looking at the state of the nation. Let me just, on the state of the nation, this morning,
There we have the Daily Nation.
I've tried to find that cartoon. I couldn't find it anywhere. Oh, all right, at least our director found it. Courts go easy on the injunctions. Matters tea, coffee sector reforms.
How hot is the coffee?
Yeah. The coffee might not be as hot if at all someone can swim in it. Courts go easy on the injunctions. All right. And that's the cartoon on the Daily Nation. I've been trying to trace it. I couldn't find it. I wonder where they got that one. After the break, State of the Nation, Alex Moore, the political analyst, will be in studio. We're hoping to have Suba Churchill, Executive Director, Kenya National Civil Society Center, as well as members of the National Assembly, Titus Lote, MP Kachiliba, and Wakili Njeri Maina, woman representative, Kirinyaga County. Do stand by for that conversation, of which you can also be part of through our social media handles on X, TV47 News, and on Facebook, TV47 Kenya. And then that conversation later on about having events on a budget. Times are rough, yes, but you still need to have your events. Still need to hold a birthday party for your son or daughter, or for your mpoa. How can you do that with the prevailing economic conditions?
Oh yes, there you have it. A CPA, Wainaina, financial literacy advisor and author from Dream Credit, as well as Ann Gaither, an event organizer of Eva's Events Limited, also wealth advice. I will be giving you all that later on Biashara Tuesday right here, just actually making it practical. If you're having a budget of, let's say, 5,000, can you actually have like a whole wonderful event and people actually remember it? Yes.
Okay. Well, you're watching Morning Cafe. National Assembly, after more than 2 months in recess, they're back to a very full entry, and that will form the bulk of our discussion this morning. But the main headlines today, both on the Daily Nation, the Standard, the Business Daily, and all other major headlines, we're still paying tribute to Kelvin Kiptum, the men's world marathon record holder, who passed on Sunday through a tragic road accident along the Eldama Ravine Road at the tender age of 24. Now, Kiptum had promised to run a competitive marathon in under 2 hours, and that was going to be a major feat. World leaders, fans, sports enthusiasts, and other Kenyans continue to send their messages of condolences, including President William Ruto, who described Kiptum as a star and said arguably one of the world's finest sportsmen who broke barriers to secure a marathon record. Eliud Kipchoge, a marathon champion, who says he is deeply saddened by the tragic passing of the marathon world record holder and rising star, Kelvin Kiptum, describing him as an athlete who had a whole life ahead of him to achieve incredible greatness. I'm reading straight from the front page of the Standard this morning, and all these images and messages have been superimposed against a black background. This morning we have in studio Alex Mwathi, political analyst. It's good to have you in studio. Karibu sana.
Thank you, thank you. Always a pleasure to be here.
It's always good to have you. And also Suba Churchill, Executive Director, Kenya National Civil Society Center. It's also good to have you in studio. Karibu sana.
Thank you very much for having me here.
Yes, and probably I'll give you a chance to start off from that rather somber note, to also pay tribute to this fallen athlete who had a very promising career ahead of him. Alex.
Yeah, I think it's in May, after he won the London Marathon, that Eliud Kipchoge said that this is the man that will run the under 2 hours. Mm-hmm. And so when he broke the record a few months after, it was really a vindication of that statement that he could see the future. Because remember, Kipchoge is now much older, so this was a star that was coming. And mine is just to pass my condolences to the family and those that are close to him and the entire athletic community in Kenya, because I believe that it's a loss not only for the family, but having done what is done so far, it's a loss to the entire fraternity and the country. We've lost one ambassador, one ambassador. May God give them peace that surpasses all understanding, even at this difficult time. Okay. And mine is to just look at what has been happening in social media and request us as Kenyans, for once, let's not speak without thinking. Let's not pack our brains and type on the keyboards. Let's be sensitive to the family, that you don't, accidents do happen. And if there's anything, there will be investigation by the police. Let the family mourn in peace.
And
don't bring that pain off.
Now that you've mentioned that, because yes, there's been quite a curious reaction, especially on Twitter. And we've seen this over and over, that Kenyans on Twitter are quick to jump into conclusions, start attacking other people, start painting other people in bad light, without proof, without any basis. And kindly comment on that.
Without any inkling of truth about what you say about others. I think we need to slow down on that, especially when you go on a character assassination of people. Just because you saw something small, then you create this whole theory of what you think could have happened. And especially when it affects other people, I think as a people, we should be sensitive. The banters that we pass at each other, sometimes, most of the times, all the times, are not necessary when we have a situation like this.
All right.
Let the family mourn in peace. And whenever something happens, if it's political, please go ahead. Politics is propaganda, I told you many times. So say whatever you want to say.
About politics.
About politics, yeah, you know. But,
This one is too
and
close.
politicians,
Yes.
and, you know, sometimes they make some crazy statements and you want to create a banter about it. But when it's about serious issues like this, I think we need to slow down.
Okay.
We need to really slow down. I'm looking at this also on another matter that's not related, but there's something also that's been happening. You know, there's a lady from, she's calling herself Dr. Mwarakwet, who had done a song, I don't know, Malisafi, Triton. And you can see the same kind of attack and all that. And I'm thinking, why are you doing that? Let people be.
Okay. Yeah. Bwana Churchill.
Yes, I think on my own behalf and on behalf of the civil society sector, we join the family of Kelvin Kiptum. Indeed a promising athlete, and I think it's a sad moment for sports enthusiasts and athletes in general that we lost a young man who was just discovering his talent and exploring it to its full potential. At 24, we imagine if Kipchoge is still running, then Kiptum had about 10 years ahead of him to continue with the expression of talent that he seemed to have, you know, discovered the nick of time. And so it's a very sad day. I watched the family. They're devastated, obviously, and of course, as my colleague has said, we'd want to urge caution. Of course, in Africa, people don't just die. If you read John S. Mbiti, African religions and so on, and practices, you realize that in Africa, people don't just die. Every death must be attributed to something or must have been caused by people who looked at you with a bad eye. And so when you see all this matter of speculations and so on and so forth, and I think it is part of the African tradition and practice of wanting to find out why, you know, at such a prime life, you know, the young man, you know, perished in a very tragic accident. We would want to hope that his demise would give hope to youngsters, because it was not related to his career. He died in an accident like any other accident can happen, and we do not want to encourage, you know, all manner of speculations. Anytime I've had people discussing his death, there have been people who say, could he have been, you know, intoxicated and so on. I think that for now is immaterial and is unhelpful. Let's, you know, join the family in paying their last respects to a dear colleague that unfortunately has lost his life at the nick of time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, the world and Kenya continues to mourn the death of Kelvin Kiptum, who died at the age of 24 in that fatal road accident along the Eldama Ravine Road. From that, there's another story that doesn't feature on the front pages. Of course, the front pages today have been dedicated to tributes to this fallen athlete. And because of that, there's a story that I feel may escape our attention. And it's actually on page 6 of the Standard. It's also been highlighted on the front page. And this is a Triton oil saga. And I'd like us to have a mention. We have about 10 minutes or so before we go on a break. So I'd like to leave there a discussion about Parliament's entry to that side of the break. Before that, we could make a mention of this. A court in Nairobi yesterday acquitted 4 persons who had been charged alongside Yagnesh Devani over the Triton oil saga. Milimani Magistrate Zainab Abdul said there was no evidence to implicate them for the alleged theft of $12 million from the Kenya Commercial Bank. And now those acquitted include 2 KCB employees. However, it was unclear whether Devani was acquitted. But we saw that Yagnesh Devani was extradited back to Kenya just a month or so ago. to actually face court. This trial has been there for over 22 years, and I'm sure you have the wealth of history to understand what happened. And when you see a case go on for 22 years, and then at the end of it, it's just a simple acquittal like this, so what does it make you feel?
We are a country that has been built on lies, on sand, on corruption, to an extent that you rise in leadership sometimes more on how much you're able to cut deals. Because around that table, you got to show what you have. Show me your whatever. Now for them, is show me your money. And the Triton saga has been there. Fact is that the theft happened. It was not corruption. This was basic theft. And the story is that they brought in fuel, and that was an asset, under asset financing. So the fuel was a collateral, but the Kenya Pipeline was able to hand over the fuel to Devani and Triton without the due process of that collateral being released by the banks. So really money was stolen from the banks. And to see an acquittal, you just understand that big money has played its part. The man himself has been outside this country, and there's been a long, drawn battle to extradite him back to the country. And he's smiling. He's happy.
Oh.
He's eaten his money for 22 years, and he will continue eating his money in the coming years. And maybe a few more people will become richer in this country. Unfortunately, I sound very negative today, but that's a fact.
Yes, but just the fact that he's been on the run for so many years in itself could be seen as an admission of guilt. The fact that he can be extradited after so many years on the run, if at all he was innocent, he would have been comfortable to face the law and the courts directly. It had to take an extradition for him to come, only for the courts to acquit him or acquit the others charged alongside him.
You know, first of all, the mere fact that there have been acquittals, irrespective of whether Devani himself has been acquitted, leaves a bad taste in the mouth, because we have had quite a number of acquittals in the recent past, in most of which are corruption-related cases. And so for the courts to have acquitted, you know, four in a matter as sensitive as the Triton case, immediately after the reappearance of Devani in the case, you know, leaves a bad taste in the mouth. Mm-hmm. We would want to believe that, you know, this case having happened having started years gone by, and a number of Kenyans are not familiar with even what the Triton, you know, scandal is all about. The courts ought to have been patient so that, you know, the rest of the public is able to catch up with what exactly happened. Because in the Triton case, I think, and you're right, because for one to have run away, you know, it's like the case of Mr. Madhenge, who ran away from a local police station here. You don't run away when you are innocent. And then, you know, disappear for 3 months, you know, travel immediately after from the US, disappear for 3 months, and when you are caught, you also disappear. It becomes very difficult to plead innocence in such circumstances. And the same applies for this. The courts ought to have been sensitive even to public opinion and expectation that, you know, as the trial proper of Devani starts, in the process, people would get to know and understand why the four are being acquitted. And so that in itself, in my view, is lack of, you know, perceptive political implications of some of these actions that the courts may have engaged. Of course, courts are at liberty to acquit people because, again, they face the risk of being accused of, you know, malicious prosecution when it is already evident. Of course, these are trials that may have happened before in the absence of Devani and so on. But we want to believe that, you know, the fact that he was brought back to the country means that the burden of the evidence that the courts are looking for will be adduced on Devani, so that he does not also just walk scot-free as the others have done.
Yeah.
But it does not portend very well for our fight or so-called fight against corruption as a country, because we'd want really to see big fish. The other thing I want to add on this is that the likes of Devani did not just act on their own. My suspicion is that they were political godfathers. They are political godfathers, they were and they are still there, who superintended all this. And when we do fail to take political responsibility and pin down those who, oversaw all this as it unfolded and as it happened, then the fight against corruption does not, yield much. And so we'd want to see those who were in charge of these dockets also held accountable in one way or the other.
Okay.
So that a powerful message, a strong message can be sent out there that nobody, is safe, and everybody must pay a price for their acts of commission and omission in matters of corruption.
Allow me to invite onto the panel Bwana Kimani Ngunjiri, former MP Bahati constituency. Karibu sana, it's good to have you in studio.
Thank you.
You just found us discussing this issue of the Triton court case that has taken 22 years to determine. And we're seeing acquittals at the end of 22 years. People have been on the run for most of that time. It has taken extradition for them to be returned to Kenya to face the law, only for them to be acquitted a month or so later. And the question we're asking, and the question many people are asking is, how come in Kenya we rarely get a conviction when it comes to corruption cases? And it's not something that has happened or has begun just today. This is a case from 22 years ago. How come it is such a rare thing in Kenya for us to get someone in court on corruption charges and get a conviction?
Well, it is, this case has brought a lot of confusion because sometimes actually even we don't know where to start, even discussing it, because we heard when he was being arrested that he ran away, all those kind of things. I've not heard of the hearing of the case. For him appearing in the court like the other cases. So now it has just come on the judgment, and he appears. As now he has been seen, he has come, and the case got finished. So did we see the hearing for 20 years? Appearing in the court, being postponed, being done other things?
He was charged in absentia.
Yeah, you see now, that one is very interesting. Then when is the judgment been done, then now you hear something else different. I think this is something which is bringing a lot of confusion to the Kenyans and all of us, even the leaders. And I think something must be followed, the law and the constitution. I don't know why the case should take 22 years. Even the interest of the damage or the losses will be here for 22 years. It cannot help Kenyans, or it cannot be a judgment which can actually put a good impact of showing that our country, they are serious on following the corruption. If it's a serious case or serious issue in this country, it's the corruption. Because everybody is crying because of the corruption. We are losing a lot of money because of the corruption. And if it's this the handling, which is the cases are going to be handled, then actually Kenyans will not have any interest of following such cases.
Okay.
Because 20 years, surely, and we have not seen it going on, as I said before, then the judgment comes, and he comes back. And I want to tell you from the experience I know, you are going to see other things now coming up. After that case is now finished, you will be able to hear other cases of the people who are left with the premises, properties, and all those kind of things. You will come to hear now another cases coming, so many cases.
So you're saying we could expect more acquittals, especially on this matter going forward?
Yeah, and also the property he had, because for that time when we were following, I think he had many stations, petrol station, other buildings. And I think after that, some were sold when he's not there, some maybe went with the other people. So I think it's a it's an issue is going to come again.
Okay.
On what happened with this property, what happened with this petrol station, what happened with the people he had given loan of the terms of the fuel. I think now we are going to see other things following.
Okay.
But from that time up to now, also, even if they start coming again, how do you put the evidence?
But I'm wanting to add something just before the break, briefly.
Yes, just for clarity for our viewers, the 4 people who are acquitted were acquitted because of part of the KCB bank that discounted the invoices without fuel actually being sold. Okay. So this was from the, because this theft is different from the other theft, most of the thefts that we know where people steal from government. This is stealing from KCB. Of course, there's a supposition that, of course, the powers that be were involved. Since now Devani is extradited into Kenya, he's going now to be charged afresh, or continue with the case that was charged in absentia, basically for defrauding KCB by pretending to have sold fuel and collecting the money. Remember what I said, that the fuel he had imported was a collateral to KCB. So if he sold without KCB knowing, so then he pocketed the money.
It's his presence in Kenya
17 billion shillings.
Case to proceed.
Yes, to proceed.
Okay.
But remember also that this is also setting a background, because if the people who are supposed to discount are innocent, then what are you accusing me of? So really, this is a precursor for him now to be actually acquitted. And I'm praying that our courts do their work. Now, one also thing that I like to say, sometimes people like pushing it, the courts are this, the courts are that. But courts are like Caesar's wife. They listen to the evidence presented to them. They evaluate the evidence. So if people on the other side don't want to present tangible evidence, the courts have no alternative but to release people.
Yes.
You can't go and hold somebody's money in bank and say that this is a proceed of 200 million shillings, a proceed of corruption, and you have no evidence.
And of course, 22 years can do a lot to such kind of evidence.
A child is born. Just to mention that
Kiptum
is 24.
My colleague Stanley, we're working together, we're hosting this show together. He's actually 22 years old as it is. I think this case started.
Kiptum is only 2 years older. So really a child is born and is a father or a mother.
Well, you're watching Morning Cafe. Do stand by for a lot more discussion, especially on the parliamentary entry now that the National Assembly and the Senate get back to work today. And Titus Lote, MP Kachiliba, will be joining us for that discussion. You're watching Morning Cafe. Let's take a break now. Cafe on TV47 with me, Fred Indimuli. We continue with the discussions here. We're still in studio with Alex Mwathi, Suba Churchill, and Kimani Ngunjiri, MP, former MP Bahati. And I'm informed that you're required in radio because it is World Radio Day today. And I'm told you already had an appointment there. Yeah. And I'd like to invite Bwana Titus Lote onto the set, yes. So that as you leave, he also joins us as we discuss the in-tray for Parliament. Remember today, both the National Assembly and the Senate resume after more than 2 months of recess. So thank you so much, Bwana Kimani Ngunjiri, and we look forward to hosting you in the coming days for more discussions. Asante sana.
Thank you. Thank you. Asante.
Bwana Lote, karibu sana.
Thank you.
And we've been discussing a lot more about other issues, but I'd like to give you an opportunity because the main story is on the front pages of the Daily Nation and the Standard, and Kenyans continue to mourn this legend who passed on at the very tender age of 24, Kelvin Kiptum, the men's world marathon record holder. And probably as we invite you to this panel, you'd start by paying your tribute as well.
Yeah, it's a very sad day for Kenyans yesterday to hear that such a young, budding athlete lost his life through a road accident. My condolences to the family and to the people of Kenya for having lost a legend. This was a young man that was actually had a promising career, because at the age of 24, he was about to run the marathon in less than 2 hours. That is something that is magnanimous. And it was an expectation of everybody that if he continued like that, if death never robbed him from us, he was going to be one of the greatest athletes in the globe. So my condolences to the people of Kenya, to the family, and to the athletic fraternity in large.
All right. Now, today is a big day for you, and we'll be joined with by one of your colleagues as well, because we want to take a look at Parliament's in-tray, the National Assembly especially. You're resuming your sittings today afternoon after actually more than 2 months of recess amidst a highly charged political environment. One would have expected that given the kind of issues that we are facing as a country right now, that probably this holiday would have been shorter. Probably a special sitting of the House would have been called to discuss quite a number of things. One, we have the issue of the reconstitution of the IEBC. We are now facing a constitutional crisis at the end of this month because of delays in getting commissioners for that. The budget making process is already underway, and I'm sure you'll be called upon to give your input to that, as well as the affordable housing bill, which has been quite a hot potato, but a key flagship project for the government. And even as you respond to that, I'd like to invite Wakili Njeri Maina, woman representative, Kirinyaga County, to join the panel. She's also a member of the National Assembly, and this debate really needs her input as well. So I think now we're fully constituted to look at the in-tray of Parliament as you resume. What is your top priority? And we'll start with you, Bwana Lote. What is your top priority now as you resume work?
Well, thank you. That was a very long break for the members of Parliament. I think I could see a sigh of relief from every member of Parliament.
A bit too long?
Well, it was actually, because one of our roles is to legislate, and when we are out for 2 months, basically means that our role of legislation is actually muted. And we are people that would like to see that a lot of our bills, a lot of our laws are actually brought into book. So we're happy that after the 2 months break, we're back. And I think everybody is looking forward to be in Parliament today. Well, that being said, I think there are a lot of things that are waiting for us in Parliament. You've mentioned some of them, but I think there are those that are of priority. And the reason why you've said that you expected Parliament to have reconstituted a little bit earlier, because there are things of national importance that needed to have been discussed. Personally, I know there is a constitutional deadline of the 7th of March for us to have reconstituted our boundaries. And we cannot do that. There is one constituency that do not have a member of Parliament because the IBC is not well structured. We also asked two wards that also do not have members of the ward assembly, the county assembly. That is a very important exercise because the people of those constituencies, the people of those wards are denied opportunities of being represented. And the reason why it is sacrosanct, is urgent that we reconstitute our IEBC. The courts last week allowed the process to continue, the Matara team to continue recruiting the IEBC commissioners, and yet the country was divided because of that. And the reason why we went to the streets in last year, and one of the aspects that drove us to the street was that we needed to have a dialogue on some of the things that were not going on very well. And there was an agreement in Bomas, in what we call the NADCO, where both the opposition and the government sat down and said, we need a reconstituted IEBC that is slightly different from what is provided by the law. And so that debate, that document, the NADCO report, will unlock the reconstitution of the IEBC, will unlock it in a manner that is acceptable by both sides. As it is now, when the courts pronounced that the Matara team could continue now to employ the IEBC commissioners, it talked about the constitution that was rejected, and especially by the opposition. And you find that one of the proposals was that to have more 3 members so we will be sitting on the panel, 3 members from the political parties. That basically means the politicians and the political parties want to have more say in terms of who becomes the IEBC commissioner. So that report is the report that I think will come first as
that is the priority.
Most urgent priority, because if we cannot meet the constitutional deadline that is set by our constitution, then we will go into a constitutional crisis. So we will unlock that as soon as we go to Parliament today as one of the key things. The other thing you've talked about is the budget process. We know in this country, Kenyans are making a lot of noise, and there are a lot of proposals, there are a lot of taxes that have actually come to the people. We did a proposal, a finance bill, it went through, but Kenyans are still making noise, and we're listening to Kenyans, and so we will want, I know, when members come into Parliament, we'll want to discuss some of the aspects that will spur our budgets to become more lively than it is now.
Okay. And Wakili Njeri Maina, because of the break you've had, there's been a lot of time to politic. And we've seen quite a number of the members of the National Assembly especially pronounce themselves on a lot of matters that could affect even the conduct of Parliament, issues to do with how to handle the judiciary, even in the budget-making process. Dismissing, outright dismissal of what is contained in the NADCO reports. Your colleague Bwanalote says the NADCO report will be the priority. But with the kind of sentiments we've had, are you certain that that will be given priority, given what we've had, even from the leader of majority in recent weeks?
Thank you for having me. First, I want to pass my condolences to the family of very young and promising Kelvin Kiptum, and also to the people of Kirinyaga County. We've lost more than 23 persons to illicit alcohol. And, you know, that time that we spend during recess is not really spent politicking. I think that period is given so that we can also execute our mandate of serving the people at the grassroots level. And that is really what is intended by Parliament when we go on break. The priority as we resume today, of course, the first is to constitute you know, the House rules and procedures and all that. And after the procedures, what will be tabled first is, of course, the NADCO report is a priority, like my colleague has said, so that we can have a way forward on constitution of the IEBC, because there are many things that are pending, and they are crucial matters. A constitutional crisis that is looming because IEBC has not yet been constituted. Another issue that will come up as a priority is the housing bill. If you recall, during recess, the courts pronounced themselves, and of course we want to do things the right way, and the government is a priority to ensure that what we do is enshrined in the law. And the president has been very vocal and passionate about the affordable housing. So that will be a priority for Parliament, so that we are not amiss with the law. And of course, the budget and the issues that deserve to be paid attention to in regard to the urgent petitions that are before the House, so that we can move the country forward. And Parliament is an institution that is very crucial to the Republic, because when we are on recess, so many things cannot move. Because what we do, the legislation bit of it, is a very crucial aspect of this nation.
Yes. Bernard Churchill, we've seen previously when there's a matter of national importance, the Speaker of the National Assembly or the Senate just calls for special seating in the House, whether or not the members are on recess. But this time round, we are staring at a constitutional crisis because of the delay in reconstituting IEBC, and that deadline for delimitation of boundaries that comes up lapses actually on March 7th. Yet this has not been treated as a crisis with any sense of urgency. The 13th Parliament, and I'm looking at the order paper for today, and it says correctly that this is the second session of the 13th Parliament. Do you think that this House needs to do or conduct its business in a different way, probably with some sense of urgency?
Thank you very much. You know, when the president found himself in some kind of crisis with the Social Health Insurance Fund, and especially after, you know, sections of it had been declared unconstitutional, we have had, you know, committees, two committees of Parliament, a joint committee of health and that of, you know, finance and planning, doing some work. That is how the extent to which the Kenya Kwanza government prioritized issues of social health, because taxes are involved. Their appetite for taxing Kenyans. So that to them was a priority. One would have expected that in the same context and vein, that the government and Parliament would have prioritized the processing, the tabling and processing of the NADCO report. That to them was not a priority. And it is therefore little wonder that there are people who are now playing to a section of the gallery. We have seen the recruitment panel, you know, trying to outdo themselves like the reed dancers of Eswatini, trying to catch the eyes of the king and threatening to proceed with a process that they know themselves.
The actions are based on a court order.
It's based on a court order, but you see their own argument, the panel's own argument in that same court was that there are political considerations. That was the argument. So when we see Dr. Makanda, you know, all of a sudden becoming overzealous, as if he's going to hire his own farm manager. This is a national and very sensitive issue. And so, whereas the protests that were called by Azimio forced Kenya Kwanza on the negotiating table, what we are seeing is lack of sufficient political will to move the process forward.
Do you, for example...
And if you asked me, I would tell you that because the Social Health Insurance Fund is not yet law, there is no vacuum. There is the NHIF that has been there. And so if you asked me, I would urge the members of Parliament that are here to prioritize the NADCO report over all these things that, you know, the Joint Committee of Health and you know, finance and
on the reconstitution of the IEBC, now that you've mentioned the selection panel led by Bwana Makanda has already kicked off its process or continued the process based on that court order. And now with the return of Parliament looking at the NADCO report, do you see a clash of some sort? What should we expect with that divergence of approach?
The Makanda team cannot proceed without financing. No finances leave the consolidated one without the authority of Parliament. We know how government runs. We may not have been in government, but we know how government runs. That committee is handicapped. One, they don't have resources. They will need to convene in a government infrastructure. So whoever wants to convene them in total disregard of, you know, the national consensus around the NADCO report would be going against, you know, the emerging consensus that we need a more inclusive process. In fact, part of the reason why the process as set out in the current law was contested is because when you have a panel that is constituted by agencies whose heads are appointed by the president, who is a contender in the anticipated election, one of the leading stakeholders, that is the basis of the consultation. And therefore, for us to have an election management body that is broadly acceptable to different stakeholders and more so to contending political parties, I think we need to, yes, recognize that there's likely to be a constitutional crisis. We need to accept that it is practically impossible to review boundaries, because again, that's a very political process. Even if you went to the constituencies that our colleagues here represent, they have their own issues, and that will take quite a while.
Okay.
And so we may want to consider, either accepting the reality that for purposes of the 2027 elections, it is not possible to review the boundaries, or tinker with the constitutional threshold within which those boundaries must be reviewed. Again, something that will bring out a completely different conversation. Okay. And how Kenyans are argumentative, and it is part of a democratic
to
process.
The issue of delimitation and review of boundaries. But Bwana, do you feel a lack or a slowdown on the support that the NADCO process had last year? That by the time we were getting to December and the report was ready to be handed over to the principals, the political support behind that process was already waning, hence the lack of urgency even from the part of Parliament.
Fred, I've told you, I've said many times that the unfortunate thing is that this country was hijacked a good number of years ago, I think as soon as we gained independence, by political cartels. To an extent, their job is to ensure that we always have a crisis after crisis, because they eat out of crisis. To an extent that no one takes it serious, whether you in position or on the government side. As a country, we're looking at a specific date that we have pronounced to ourselves through the Constitution, and we are still arguing about the basics. The appointment of the panel, whether it's done by Kenya Kwanza or Azimio, is a constitutional process. Until you change that constitution, you can't change that. To an extent, when you have people saying the NACADA report debate in Parliament, which will take about 3-4 months to debate before they can agree, unless you want them to be rubber stamped, it will take some time. So obviously, 7th March will be overtaken. We have a constitutional process. So what we are saying, let's pack our constitution until this thing comes ready. To an extent, both sides of the divide want this country in a crisis. And that crisis mood is so good for the political cartel in this country. So because they eat out of that. You create a crisis, so that now people start running around looking for solution. In all these shenanigans, one thing that keeps getting forgotten is that almost 200 institutions in this country, in my understanding, don't have legal standing today. That includes Kenyatta National Hospital. It includes the Ordnance Factory. It includes the Mathari National Hospital. They don't have a legal standing in this country today, because Parliament has been lazy, in my opinion, to ratify that, to allow that the extension of the period over which that the instruments that established them were there. So we are looking at crisis after crisis, and we are happy going into those crises. To an extent, a report done by a few people can hold this country to ransom, even against its own constitution.
Yet,
for me, that's a bigger issue.
And it would appear that this is not the first time we're doing this, because even the National Assembly on the issue of the two-thirds majority, two-thirds gender rule.
Exactly.
We defied that as a country, and we're in a state of continued defiance without consequence. And my question is, are we looking to do the same with the delimitation and review of boundaries? Because we've seen nothing happens. You can defy the Constitution without consequence. Are we looking at a situation where once we normalize defying the Constitution without consequence, we could be changing dates, probably even the date of the election, as long as we know nothing will happen.
Well, I don't think that is true. There is no definite defying of the Constitution. The two-thirds gender rule, you remember the last parliament, the 12th parliament, there was an agitation by many institutions to say that the parliament needed to have been closed down, shut down, and people were supposed to go to elections because it was not properly constituted. Mm-hmm. And you remember the debates that came around that time was, as much as we want our parliament to be two-thirds, to have a two-thirds gender rule in it, it was not possible through an election. You remember that kind of discussion that was there, that it is the public that are supposed to elect members. So if you go to parliament to find that there are fewer ladies or fewer women than men, then it is not our problem. It's not the problems of Kenyans. It's the problem of how it was structured, so that it wasn't providing a clear directions in which the two-thirds gender rule was supposed to be achieved in parliament. But then in the executive, that was there. It was actually in the executive, because those are appointment positions where you actually are supposed to appoint two-thirds of your cabinet, two-thirds of principal secretary, two-thirds of many of the institutions. That was something that was then divided. I think that was defied by the institution, by the government of then. But if you look at the government now, to be fair to this government, the two-thirds gender rule, look at the cabinet. We've achieved the two-thirds gender rule. Look at it. Look at the principal secretaries. I cannot say that there is a mechanism that the government is defying. So I think Kenyans, as we look at our constitution, let us look at how best we can be able to achieve two-thirds in the legislature. But in the judiciary and in the executive, I think that is supposed to be as clear as it is now.
The question is, because there was to be a consequence of failure to adhere to a requirement by the Constitution that this is how this should be constituted, but there was no consequence. Now we're looking at defying the set deadline for delimitation of boundaries and review of boundaries. We are going to let it lapse. And the expectation, or if you look at the faces of politicians, is like they understand there will be no consequence.
No, well, let me come back to that again. The consequences were there. But I think the country, the whole country, accepted that the two-thirds gender rule is not very important, because if it was, we will have actually seen it come. We will have actually seen it come to the NADCO report. People will have discussed it. Why are we putting a lot of emphasis on the constitution of the IBC, and yet we did not consider another constitutional crisis that we have, the two-thirds gender rule? Nobody. If you look at the whole,
I think there's a mention of it in the NADCO report.
The whole NADCO report, the whole NADCO proposal, and even the findings of the NADCO, that thing became silent, because like as Kenyans, we've accepted that that is something that we can go with.
Is it as simple as Kenyans accepting that we cannot meet the requirements we set out for ourselves in the Constitution?
Well, I think otherwise then it will have been discussed at the NADCO with a lot of seriousness. Nobody discussed with a lot of seriousness.
I know you want to react, but allow me to bring in.
I just wanted to throw in a statement,
Okay.
only a statement.
Okay, very briefly.
On national TV, let's not make statements that don't augur well, that are not anchored in law. The only way Kenyans can agree or refuse to something is through a referendum. Mm-hmm. We didn't do a referendum on the two-thirds majority.
Okay.
It's a constitutional requirement in the Constitution.
Okay.
Until you change that requirement, the deadline stands. You can't sit back and say,
Unless
we
you
had a
amend.
debate in public and people accepted. That's not acceptable.
Jerry Minor, I'd like to get your take on this issue.
You know, it's very unfortunate that years later we've never complied with the two-thirds gender rule. And as a woman leader in this nation, it is quite troublesome. And I recall in the last regime, the then Chief Justice wrote to the President on dissolving Parliament due to that failure to be compliant with the Constitution that we promulgated in 2010. And the first thing to show the goodwill and commitment to be compliant with the two-thirds gender rule immediately the president was sworn, I am in the Committee of Justice and Legal Affairs in Parliament, and he wrote a letter to Parliament and copied to us that Parliament must come up with a framework to ensure that we are compliant with the 2/3 gender rule. As I speak, there has been several multi-agency approaches to that. There's a report that is due to be tabled in Parliament in regard to that. And of course, it is a work in progress. And it is because, you know, politics and the ideal nature of how we want things to be, they clash time and time again.
But the question is, because you're saying it's work in progress and it will take time, should we have the same approach to this other deadline that we're looking at, this prescription that the delimitation and review of boundaries has to happen within a period not less than 8 years and not after 12 years, as prescribed in Article 89 of the Constitution, that this has to happen? Should we approach it in the same way that it is a progressive issue and there are no time limits, so even if we defy the Constitution in March, we still have time to do it?
No, Fred, and that's why I have said that there's the political aspect of it and there's the ideal nature of the way we want things to run. If you recall, the president announced the persons who will be on the selection panel and they were gazetted. And then there was now the protests on the streets. The Azimio coalition came in and they had an issue and they were up in arms about it, about the integrity of the next general election. And just because the president respects and wanted to ensure that there is peace in this nation, he ceded ground and said, well, let's have a sit down and have this conversation. And that is why now we have to discuss the NADCO report, because we just caught up in a quagmire of sorts. And it is unfortunate, but it is the way the politics play out or have played out in this nation. It is unfortunate for the people of Kenya. It is unfortunate because the Constitution is very clear. But I also need to remind you that there is no clear timeline that is stipulated in law that says that if the IEBC panel is not set immediately after the term expires within this timeline, then, you know, there's going to be consequences. Of course, because of the looming deadline of delimitation of boundaries, we are caught up in a situation that would see us being in a clash with the Constitution of Kenya.
Okay. Yes, Bwana Church.
Yeah, you know, first of all, let me share this information. Those of us who are privileged to be part of the BAMBA's Constitutional Conference know where the 2/3 gender principle started. And you know that the BAMBA's constitutional proposals were anchored on a different system of government, parliamentary actually. And the formula that Mheshimiwa is talking about was there. The 2/3 gender principles formula was in the mixed member proportionate electoral system that was part of the BAMBA's draft. Now, because of contention around whether to go presidential, whether to go parliamentary, or whether to be hybrid, a group of MPs under the former MP for Mandera, I don't know whether it was Mandera East or West, Abdi Kadir Mohammed, convened in Naivasha and somehow struck a deal that they go presidential. Now, when they went presidential and removed the mixed member proportionate representation, they left the principle intact, but removed the formula through which it was to be achieved. Mm-hmm. And so that is why we are left hanging with the 2/3 gender principle. Mm-hmm. A very good idea and an ideal that we must continuously work towards achieving. I also remember that, you know, a section of the society, particularly the women's movement, went to court at some point. And I remember the former Chief Justice cautioning them against going to court. Because the court basically said, reading through the Constitution, we can only say that this thing is aspirational, which for me was very unfortunate because that principle had a formula to it which, you know, got removed in Naivasha. Now, making it aspirational has created this laxity. Mm-hmm. But we cannot forgive the current government, because I see the two Waheshimiwas here, you know, trying to say demonstrate how the current government is committed. We must remind President William Samoei Ruto that during the campaigns, he had a convening at Nyayo Stadium, signed a charter with women at a very elaborate event, and promised that his government, first of all with the cabinet, forget about representation in parliament, his cabinet, what has stopped President William Samoei Ruto from having 2/3 of his cabinet from either gender? I mean, you don't need a law for that. So there is no political will. Even when you talk about principal secretary, those are not members of the cabinet.
Okay.
We are talking of the cabinet that the constitution sets at not more than 21. That in itself is lacking the 2/3 or 1/3.
My concern now.
So it's lack of political will.
Yes.
The cost to pay for not reviewing boundaries is so dear to Parliament itself. There are a number of constituencies, including in central Kenya, where Mheshimiwa comes from, that are protected because the number of voters or population of those constituencies, including in Taita Taveta County, do not meet the threshold set out in the Constitution. And the population having increased, and with the caveat set on the size of Parliament, a number of constituencies will be lost.
And I've heard a lot of the blame going towards politics and the kind of politics we play in this country. And politics too is also being mentioned as the remedy to some of these issues. On this delimitation, do you think that a political remedy can be found to a constitutional requirement? And I'd like even all the panels to, because I'm looking at the oath and affirmation of members of parliament, and you solemnly affirm that you'll bear true faith and allegiance to the people and Republic of Kenya, that you will obey, respect, uphold, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of this Republic. Not everyone does that, but members of parliament do that. Now, sitting back and watching and blaming politics, yes, we're going to defy a constitutional requirement that we sought to protect and blame it on politics. But do you think a political remedy can be found to a constitutional requirement?
One thing is definite, that the constituencies that are going to be affected, unless I'm informed otherwise, are 27 by this whole shenanigan. And it's not something that has just happened. We knew. We knew in 2012.
It has taken 12 years.
We knew in 2012. We knew. In 2012, we knew. So hence, it's not something that has come to us as of now. Those two issues, what I'd said earlier, that there is a lack of interest to be able to solve issues. You know that over the years we've had officials defying courts and even stating in public that they are going to defy. And I'm not talking about the recent President Ruto's statement. All presidents have defied. All the presidents before have defied courts. So he might be the only one who have said I'll defy. But the rest have defied without any consequences whatsoever. To an extent, even when they leave office, no consequences. So your statement is right, that we know as a people that there are no consequences to going around issues. And when it's a constitutional issue, and I agree with Suba about the fact that the two-gender rule was predicated on some system that people, in their haste, and sometimes I like using this word, laziness, did not notice that that had an implication on another clause in the Constitution, that they should have removed both of them. So that when you change the form of government, then you somehow change that gender rule by maybe making it progressive, making it whatever you do, so that you can support it. So bottom line is, 7th March will come. We will not have an IBC because the process of recruitment, even if the panel does what it's supposed to do, 7th is next month. It's hardly a month away.
Yep.
So they can't recruit and have an IBC in place, have an IBC doing the limitation of or whatever needs to be done. Meaning, 7th will find us. Remember number 2, the panel is constitutionally appointed. Constitutionally. Nothing to do with politics, constitutionally appointed. I want somebody to challenge me on that. Then, because the Constitution defines what needs to be done, so that committee may not do its work if the opposition does what they know best, to go back to the streets. It will not do. So either way, whether they start the recruitment process or they don't, 7th March will find us here. It's exactly the same thing as I said earlier, that we watched when laws elapsed and government institutions lost their legal standing. Do we care? We don't at all. Because we don't care that Kenyatta National Hospital, our big hospital, does not have a legal standing. We don't care. Because, like you said earlier, I'm thinking if there are people who care, the members of parliament would have demanded that they are called back. So at least they handle that. So that you don't have any illegal institutions running. Because
now that you're back and you have a full entry, there's so much to do, including the laws that could form the basis of the formation and the existence of so many government structures.
Including regulations.
Yes, there's the issue of the budget.
So
yeah. There's the issue of the affordable housing. Budgetary processes take too long. Now there's NADCO report, which could also occupy quite some time. You're the member of parliament, and I want you to look at this as a member of parliament, not necessarily from one side of the house, the majority or minority, but as a member of parliament. How is it that you are comfortable with your position as a representative of the people and watch things go wrong? And I'm asking you as a representative of all the other members of the National Assembly.
Well, first of all, let us be fair to Parliament. Parliament has got a calendar. And for you to see that you're organized, you have to follow your calendar. If Parliament has a calendar that has been defined the whole year, and then we've known for the last 12 years, 13 years now, that our two-thirds gender rule has not been met. We've known for the last 13 years that the reconstitution of our boundaries is going to be time-lapsed. We've never worked to try to solve that in 12 years. We cannot solve it by disrupting government, the parliament calendar. So let us be fair to parliament that once they've set their calendar is supposed to go in like that. Otherwise, then we become a jumbled up institution where we do not even follow what we set as a calendar. If we cannot follow a calendar, could we be able then to follow any other thing, including the constitution? Then, so that is one of the things that I want to tell this my panelists here, that let us be fair to Parliament. Parliament cannot just stop its activities, stop its calendar, because they now think out of the 12 years, 13 years, there's an urgent matter that has come in between the time when they are at recess. So that is one. Two, I want to come back to the issue of the two-thirds before I come back to talk about Parliament. In terms of the cabinet, the cabinet secretaries, President Ruto, despite the fact that he had a memorandum and a signing with the women at Nyayo Stadium, to tell even them that they're going to get 50-50 in his government. That was a gentleman's agreement with the ladies. But what the Constitution stipulates is the two-thirds gender rule, which we've met. Out of the cabinet secretaries, a third are ladies. And so basically, he did not meet the gentleman's agreement that he had with the ladies in Nyayo Stadium, but he was able to meet the provision of the Constitution. Two, in terms of the discussions to deal with defined courts, and I like what Alex has said, that all presidents, from Kenyatta 1 to Kenyatta and now to Ruto, all presidents have defied the provision of our Constitution without consequences. I'm yet to see one that has been defied by Ruto. He has just said he will defy the ruling by the corrupt judges. It did not say that it's going to defy the ruling made by courts. So let us first of all delimit that so that we cannot say that he said he's going to defy courts. He is going to defy rulings made by the corrupt judges. And we know in this country, there are judgments.
Who determines who's a corrupt judge?
Pardon?
Who determines who is a corrupt judge?
Of course, corruption is determined by activities that you do. And we know in this country that there are people that are in jail, not because they were criminals, but because they were not able to judges. And that basically tells you that this country, we've got a system problem which we need to solve. So I think what the president was bringing is bringing forth a debate so that Kenyans can start looking into our institutions properly. And he said it's not only in judiciary, it is also in the executive and also in the legislature. So I think what he has done, for me, is healthy. That let us start to look at our institutions properly so that within the legislature, within the executive, let us weed out the people that are making our systems not to work. Okay. So I have not seen him defying any. I've actually seen courts throwing out everything, including even after the Chief Justice met him in State House. Immediately after that, they were able to throw out the housing levy. Okay. And he still complied to that. So for me, I think the president, so far as I know, President Ruto has only said he's going to defy ruling made by the corrupt judges, but he has not defied any.
I have a question.
I'm sure of Uhuru.
I have a question for
yes.
the two of you, because on this issue of the relationship between the judiciary and the legislature, during this recess we had what the leader of majority said with regard to also the budgetary process, and what also your colleague, I think MP Kiborek, said on the issue of the budgetary allocations to the judiciary. And I want to ask you if you share in those sentiments that the budget-making process will be used to get back at the judiciary for not toeing to what certain forces would want.
Fred, that's a very interesting question. And what I can say without an iota of doubt is that my colleague Kiborek, unfortunately, is not in the Committee of Justice and Legal Affairs. And every committee in Parliament has state agencies that they oversight, and we have an engagement with them. They do their presentations on the budget, and we have a report on the same that we tabled in Parliament, and then the same is handed over to the Budget Committee. So of course a lot is lost in the communication, and politicians can tend to be very sensational sometimes.
Even the leader of majority.
Unfortunately,
those sentiments,
I said politicians. Unfortunately, he's also a politician. And what I can assert is that it is very important for us to remember that the independence of the judiciary must be protected for the benefit of all of us. And we must always look at things from the perspective of posterity. Because right now we are in government, 10 years down the line, there'll be another government coming in place. So we must always look at things from a perspective of the future and at the best interest of Kenyans. So what I can tell you is my personal perspective on the same, and I have made myself clear from time to time that we must respect the institution of the judiciary, and we must also deal with the rampant corruption in the judiciary. I just want to touch base with what my colleagues, my co-panelists said here, and just say it's a catch-22 situation to be president. They do agree that the president has done what he should have done in regard to the two-thirds gender principle. They also do agree that he actually constituted, and we had a gazetted selection panel, but I mean, the politics of it have his hands tied. But then I don't understand why they go then ahead to blame the president. They're like, the government of Kenya Kwanza, the president hasn't done this. I mean, he has done what he ought to have done. Okay. But then the politics of it, at the end of the day, it plays out.
The basis of the conversation today is mainly on the houses of legislation, Parliament. I'm not talking about the executive. It's the role of Parliament and their relationship to the Constitution. And because it is your mandate and you took oath. But before I come to you, Bwana Churchill, I wanted to hear Bwana Lote's take on that issue of the relationship between the legislation and the legislature and the judiciary, and the comments from both the leader of majority and your colleague, Bwana Kiborek.
Well, I think those are personal comments. Kiborek spoke as a politician, making his own personal comments. But Parliament, when Parliament pronounces itself, it pronounces itself after voting, where we all agree and say this is our common position. And the reason why people vote in Parliament is because we cannot agree 100%. Probably what we see in this Parliament, or in many other parliaments that have been, probably when people talk about the apex and everything, then everybody, that is where they can agree. But in matter to deal with constitution and constitutional processes, we don't most of the times agree, and the reason why people vote. And so when we vote, the majority take.
Okay.
So when Kiborek speaks,
and the
majority speaks,
too.
Probably if we took that to Parliament, and then he will speak his mind that like he spoke on the microphone, and then we make a vote. Okay. And I'll tell you, I don't think Parliament will jeopardize or will actually antagonize the work of the judiciary. Okay. It's as clear as it is. Parliament respect judiciary, and the President continued to say, let's respect judiciary, and I think we will continue respecting judiciary. And so we cannot deny budget because it is a constitutional body. Its part is what makes Kenyans. So that is a personal decision. That's a personal utterance. It is not Parliament.
Yes, Bonachacha.
I don't understand what happens when people join politics because, not too long ago we had Aden Duale as leader of majority. And the kind of things he used to say, you remember at one point even said, if former President Uhuru Kenyatta told him to jump from the tallest building in town, he would do so and ask why he had to do that later. The same Duale said all manner of things about Uhuru when they fell out. So I'm not surprised by the leader of majority. It is his time to dance, to do the reed dance, and catch the eye of the king. Secondly, is to point out, IEBC aside, there's this lackadaisical attitude towards constitutional commissions. The National Commission on Human Rights, remained vacant for a year. A less controversial commission during the tenure of former President Uhuru Kenyatta. Even with the IEBC, in addition to the constitutional framework, the enabling legislation says how vacancies should be filled and when panels to constitute them should be set up. What did we see when the Kenya Kwanza government came to power? To shove off commissioners that it perceived almost stole its victory. And that was the preoccupation. What we are witnessing with the discussions on the budget of the judiciary emanates from an attitude of transactional leadership. President Ruto, yes, we must admit, established the judiciary fund, put in the 3 billion a startup when he came into office. And that is why he does not understand why, even after appointing judges that former president was reluctant to appoint, any judge in his or true right mind should rule against him. So it is transactional. I've done all this for the judiciary. I don't understand. And I don't even understand the basis of all this, rampant corruption, as Mheshimiwa is calling it. Who determined that? When was this established?
But
is it not known in this country that there are names in the executive that are synonymous with corruption? Why we forget? Are our memories that short? That there are people in the executive whose names are synonymous with corruption? Today turning out to point fingers at others? How did they establish that? And where is the evidence about rampant corruption in the judiciary? When was
but Kenyans have complained about it. They have. And I am also an officer of the court, so I am aware. I speak from a point of information.
That in addition to being recently elected,
that is why I
there's something else I want
you are an officer of the court and ought to be fair.
There's something else, because
the corridors of justice.
Because of time, you'll allow me, because there's something else that's very interesting. It's in the dailies today, and this is also something that will be before Parliament. And it is called the Government Administration Laws Amendment Bill 2023. Yesterday, the Azimio Coalition sent out a statement on this. It is on page 4 of the Daily Nation, if you may look at it. Ruto trying to eclipse the National Security Council, Raila alleges. I'll read part of this as written by Azimio, that Section 7 of this amendment bill provides as follows, that there is established the office of the National Security Advisor, which shall be an office in the public service. The President shall nominate the National Security Advisor on the recommendation of the Public Service Commission. The National Security Advisor shall be appointed by the President with approval of the National Assembly. And finally, the National Security Advisor shall be the Secretary to the National Security Council. Now, if you look at Chapter 14, actually, Article 2, Chapter 14 of the Constitution, on the establishment of the National Security Council, its membership is very clear. Yes, it has 9 members, the President, the Deputy President, CS responsible for defense, CS responsible for foreign affairs, CS responsible for internal security, the AG, Chief of Defense Forces, Director General of NIS, and Inspector General of the National Police Service. To change this would require a constitutional amendment. But we're now seeing an attempt on a normal bill, Government Administration Laws Amendment Bill, to appoint, to add an individual into this list and to ensure that this new individual is a secretary to the National Security Council. Now, it brings up issues of adherence to the Constitution as well. And this is another subject that will be before the National Assembly. Now, many people are asking, it is the same thing, adherence to the Constitution, and whether or not we are trying to tinker with attempts to amend the Constitution without really going through the normal procedure. This is something parliamentarians should know. Wakili Jeremiah, we start with you.
What I can assure you is that this bill is not among the bills that is a priority to the House Business Committee to be tabled in Parliament. And what I can say is that there is a procedure and a process for legislation in this nation. So I would not want to preempt that discussion in Parliament. This bill will be tabled on the floor because we must have that conversation and hear different opinions from the various representatives of the people. And then from there, what will happen with the bill? Then we can come in and have that conversation about whether we are amiss in regard to the Constitution of 2010. But before that, I feel that it would be unfair to Parliament and even to have a discussion, or rather to cast any aspersions, because this is not a bill that has been enacted into law.
Okay. But there have been so many attempts, all of them unsuccessful, to amend this Constitution. But it would appear that there is need from very many quarters to adjust a few things in the 2010 Constitution. Do you think that this time that should be a part of the agenda of Parliament to actually adjust? Because even the NADCO report may need, in implementing it, may need some amendments to the Constitution.
Well, thank you. I think it is important that we enacted this Constitution and we also provide a clause for it to be amended, because we knew it's not as truthful as the Bible. And so 10 years, 12 years after, we've realized that there are many gaps. One of the gaps has just been pointed by Super Churchill here about the two-third gender rule, where we've actually said we need to be constituting our government through the principle of the two-third, but we did not create the mechanism after which that can come into place. So when we realized that, then we've actually been making a lot of noise about the two-third gender rule, which is not achieved. The Chief Justice written to Parliament to dissolve Parliament because we have not achieved it, and yet the Constitution does not provide an opportunity or an avenue for us to be able to achieve the two-third gender rule, and especially at the legislature. So that basically tells you that we've got gaps. The reason why we went to the NADCO, National Dialogue Committee, which was then a bipartisan, where we had all sections of government and opposition, was because there were gaps in the Constitution, and that those gaps were not able to address the challenges that we went through, including the formation of the panel that will then recruit the commissioners. And so that again shows that there was gap again in the Constitution. So there are several gaps in the Constitution. And I think it is the very high time for Kenyans to say, even as we look at other things, it's very critical for us to amend the Constitution. We have tried it and we've noted it. We went through the process that was there before, the one that took a lot of money. The BBI. The BBI. The BBI was also trying to amend the Constitution, and it was bringing forth, and many Kenyans gave their inputs into what part of the Constitution needs to be amended. And so there's the parliamentary, where we can do parliamentary, but there are those that requires a complete referendum.
Okay.
I think for me, as a member of Parliament and a member of this country, it is a high time that one of the key things that we need to put into place quickly is to amend our Constitution and close those gaps that we have already noted.
Okay. Bwana Suba Churchill, the National Security Advisor, and all the other discussions about amending the Constitution have been out of necessity. And I'm wondering how necessary such an inclusion into the National Security Council could be.
You know, these political advisors, of course, they come with the presidential system. You never hear about, strictly speaking, the advisors of the president is the cabinet. If you look even at the history of the three arms of government, how it started in medieval Europe, and how, the contestations between unilateral rule by the kings and monarchs of that time, the emergence of the cabinet was to have people that could advise and assist the president in the management of public affairs. All these shenanigans you see around advisors, we saw recently, even, Henry Rotich, who was just fresh from the courts, became as clean as snow and is now one of the president's advisors on matters economy and public finance. These are things for rewarding cronies and political rejects. And so I would not want a constitution that I fought so much, spent so much in jail, trying to push for its, realization, amended frivolously by people who did not even believe in it. Let truth be told. The histories of all these actors that we see in the political space is known, and therefore for them, if there is a way of capturing the National Security Council, because at times, most of these that are provided for in the Constitution are very clear in terms of their roles and mandate, and therefore there is need, and we have seen again another move in the judiciary, to have the president appoint more, We have seen this, by the Kiambu senator, a colleague of Waheshimiwa here, suggesting that there be amendment to the Judicial Service Commission Act and the Adjudicator Act and so on, to have more people, to make it more inclusive. Now that is the same thinking that you see here. And so when you have a bill that is sponsored by the leader of majority, all these Waheshimiwa that you see are outspoken here will cower and hide under the table when the leader of majority rises to move the motion. And the instructions will come from state. First of all, they'll be summoned, The word that the journalists use is summoned. They'll be summoned. And rather than, oversight the executive, they kowtow to its instructions.
Okay.
And theirs will be to nod in appreciation, thump their feet in approval. And that's why we must, at this very outset, not wait until it is passed. As Mheshimiwa is saying, we do not want to deal with the fait accompli.
Okay.
We want to nip it in the bud and say, this bill, first of all, is unconstitutional. Its thought process is in bad taste, and it is aimed at undermining institutions as considered and established under the Constitution.
Yes, Bwana on this
Fred,
issue, because a lot has been said about the president's system, and they say it's like having another layer of government. You already have the cabinet, but this issue of advisors is really coming out, especially that appointment of national former Treasury CS Henry Rotich as an advisor to the president, and now a national security advisor being included as part of the National Security Council.
When we were debating on the new constitution, one of the things that was critical for us is the size of government at that time. Because obviously President Moi was using the appointments to reward his political allies. To an extent, by the time Kibaki came in, I think we had about 49 cabinet ministers, and we had about 90 assistant ministers. So the whole parliament was really executive, because at that time, you remember, cabinet ministers came from parliament. And that's why we had to curtail the numbers and say, look, we only need cabinet secretaries. They don't even need assistants. So this CAS shenanigan is something that was not envisaged by Kenyans, because the constitution was a Kenyan document. Now, it is also true now that the people that be, because it's the same political grouping that has always been there. And the genesis of the leadership of this country is 18th of March 2002, when Moi had a meeting in Kasarani and appointed tribal kingpins as heads of the KANU government, with SG coming from one side. He had 4 vice presidents. So all these people who are both in opposition and government were in that group, and that's when it was formed. So the these so-called advisors, I hope you know, they are at the level of cabinet secretaries. So really, what the government is doing, and not only the government, even the previous government, is appointing more cabinet secretaries in the guise of appointing advisors. Because you have a full-fledged cabinet secretary for treasury, who is basically the advisor to the president on financial matters. Why would he need another one? Another advisor?
So it's a vote of no confidence in the cabinet secretary.
Yes, so basically then you need to sack that person and appoint. Okay. This is a backdoor appointments, and there are many. You only hear about one or two. I know you know this one, you know this lady, Juma. But every ministry has. I know the office of the cabinet, prime cabinet, has 3 of them.
Advisors.
Advisors. Okay. All are the same at the level of cabinet secretaries. So this is a backdoor of appointing people and going against the will of the people of Kenya in the constitution, where they said, we want a lean government.
Okay.
We want 21 cabinet secretaries who are the advisors to the president. Call them whatever you want, but put 21 of them.
Okay. And because of time, I'll give you each about 30 seconds for your parting shot. I'll start with you, Jeremiah.
Fred, I've just been laughing because he said that we will be hiding behind our seats when this is tabled in Parliament. And I can assure him, I sit just behind the majority leader. I invite him to be watching on that day to see and make sure that I will not be hiding and cowing, and that I will represent the interests of the people in my personal capacity and as a representative of what they would want me to push for them. And what I can say finally is that the Constitution is not cast in stone. We had the judgment from the Supreme Court during the ruling of the judgment of the BBI. And I mean, all the justices agreed that, and the Constitution has provided for mechanisms for amendment, either through a public forum or in Parliament by the representatives of the people. So we cannot sit here and say, oh, some people do not believe in the Constitution. Whether I believed in it or not does not deduce from the fact that it is open and it is a procedure that is allowed for the amendment of the same.
Okay. Thank you. Obonalote, a minute.
Well, thank you so much. I think what I would want to say is that let us allow government institutions to operate and function without over-politicizing every activity. We've seen in the past government institutions being politicized. We've seen the DCI being politicized. The president, the sitting president, has been taken to Karura Forest to record statements. The cabinet secretaries taken to Karura Forest to record statements. And after they have taken power, those statements become a nullity. So for me, I'll say it's important that we allow all institutions to take place, and that all these institutions, and especially the DCI, should not be used for political expediency like that, because we've actually still seen, even yesterday, leaders from a whole region are called to record statements as though they are all criminals that have happened to be criminals at the same time. If I am a criminal, I record a statement at the time when I commit the crime, not at the time when they feel that the whole community needs to be recording statements. I think if we do not allow institutions to operate normally, then we will find ourselves always trying to doubt everything that our institutions are doing. Otherwise, I think by all judgments, when Parliament reconstitute, we will be, as members of Parliament representing the people, you watching us, will be able to do justice to the bills that are coming our way. Please don't overjudge us, because it is all by voting, and that is our Constitution says. If the majority say yes, then that is how the country will move forward.
Okay, Wanachachu?
Yeah, in my closing mark, I would want to urge for honesty in leadership. We have seen, leaders change. It's interesting, my colleagues in Parliament are now saying the Constitution is not cast in stone. Yet the premise on which they were elected was that BBI was bad and was meant to mutilate the Constitution. Not really. Only to be the first to write memos to the joint chambers of Parliament calling for the same. The NADCO report contemplates 30 amendments to the Constitution, only slightly lower than those that were under the BBI. And so I would urge for honesty, I would urge for respect for institutions. I join him on that. And that respect must be demonstrated, not just in words, but also in deeds, so that our institutions can deliver on their respective mandates and serve for the betterment of our people.
Thank you. Finally, Bwana Mwathi.
One hopes again is hope that the members of parliament in the coming years will be serious. Because the last 1 year, we've seen a situation where not a single debate has taken place with more than 30 members in parliament, except that there was something for them to gain. And you know, sometimes it makes you remember some of the great names like Aristotle, who said that democracy is a worst form of government, is a worst form of government, because you have a cobra and a professor having the same right to vote, meaning that the level of logic and thinking is totally different. And so then your democracy doesn't give you the best that there is, according to him. And he said, but also he put a right and said that it's the best system that there is. And just to illustrate it, he said, is akin to having a dentist and a sweet trader vying for position. The campaign for the sweet vendor will be that that guy will cause you a lot of pain. And for me, I'll give you sweetness all the time. The dentist says, if your teeth are destroyed by those sweets, I'll be the one to pull them out. And the question is, will they be painful? The people elected the sweet trader.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bwana Alex Mwathi, political analyst, Suba Churchill, Executive Director, Kenya National Civil Society Center, Titus Lote, MP Kachiliba, and Wakili Njeri Maina, Woman Representative, Kirinyaga County. Our panelists this morning, as we anticipate the reopening of both houses of parliament, that's the National Assembly and the Senate, this afternoon, after more than 2 months of recess. And today we've simply been focusing on the entry that they are looking forward to. And straight to editorial comment on the same. Dear members of parliament, as you return to the hallowed halls and chambers of Bunge after a long Christmas break, it is important that you heed this call to remain faithful to the oath you swore upon being elected. Allow us to remind you that you voluntarily swore in the name of the Almighty God and solemnly affirmed that you will bear true faith and allegiance to the people and the Republic of Kenya. You further pledged to obey, respect, uphold, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the Republic. You also vowed that you would discharge your duties faithfully and conscientiously. That was your oath. It is a foundation upon which your legitimacy as representatives rests. Our nation is grappling with profound challenges. The relentless burden of high cost of living, made worse by soaring prices of essential commodities such as fuel, electricity, and food. Simultaneously, we find ourselves on the precipice of a constitutional crisis due to the prolonged delays in reconstituting the IEBC. Moreover, the crucial budget-making process demands your urgent attention and input, with the main intention being to make life better for Kenyans. Your return to the chambers presents an opportunity, a duty, to address these pressing concerns. We implore you to resist any external pressure or influences that may seek to divert you from the sacred